Mr. Prince, what's going on in your world, guys?
I'm in one of those holding patterns, waiting for potential clients to get back to me. From a company in Missouri to my pharma client to everything is like.
As long as you're not waiting for the, there are things that are worse to wait for.
So it's a good thing, hopefully. Hey, Joe.
Right? Hey, Joe, how are you?
Good.
Joe and I are meeting with, thanks for setting it up, Joe. We're meeting with 90.io at 1 o'clock this afternoon to talk about embedding our business operating system in the 90.io platform. So we'll see. I'm investing a lot of energy on the early parts of the engagement. And if you think about it logically, with it's interesting with core value, we had 50,000. Now we have to put these numbers in context. We had over 50,000 uses of the initial interview. So, totally different systems, but I chose to go with a discovery and sales, how do we close the engagement? And then how do we move it, get deeper into the engagement, do deep analysis, start helping our client understand their business as an asset, and then an asset in the context of the 3 dimensions of growth, and then execute. And execute right now is we have a ton of resources. We haven't brought that into technology yet. And so this conversation with 90.io this afternoon, we'll see what comes of it. And so what I was getting back to, I started with teasing, we had over 50,000 uses of core value, you guys, right? And a little under 3,000 of the deep analysis. And there's a reason for this. But that looks like that percentage has to be put in proper perspective, because we had some massive players using that early discovery piece with massive audiences. So it's not a 50,000 to 3,000. It's the ratio is far lower than that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's one of the things that's driving. First, let's focus on the front end of the engagement, get this all squared, and now that we have execute, guidance, and the leadership module and simulator, now we can roll into conversations like 90.io.
And one of the things that
are exciting. Does that make sense?
One of the features that they offer is to be able to without ever notes.
Hey, Joe. Hey, man. We can't hear you. You're clipping out. It's not an accusation. I'm just, technology is failing you right now.
Joe's always flipping out. I could my hearing. I thought I was listening every other word.
And let's come back. Let's have a conversation about 90.io when we come back, because, my concern is it's just going to confuse people. Should I be using, because they already get confused with Profit Sense and Clarity. I'm like, oh my God, these are completely cataclysmically different. Or BizEquity and Clarity, completely different tools with different intents. Okay. Hey, Larry, your podcast drops this morning, the one with you.
Okay, I was going to ask you that separately, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, you'll see the email will go out here.
Okay, great. Elaine, Phil, and I have the basic slide set done and flow, and we met on that. It just needs that. I think it's a little long
for the summit. Okay,
yeah, for the summit.
Yeah, you have a lot to cover.
I was going to tell you that through my little C certification last week in exit planning.
Yeah,
the information was excellent.
Cool. And John Brown got it?
John for first 4 days and Klatsch the last day.
Cool.
And they just know their stuff. They know how to articulate it. It's not a workshop. There's Q&A as we go along. They're great with that. But it's not like you're practicing anything. It's just a lot of information, but all good. A lot of it overlaps with owner-based planning.
Yes.
And especially 2 of the days, there's quite a bit of overlap. In that, they like BizEquity. They shared that. They like using BizEquity for valuation, estimation, and they talked about value. They mentioned growth drive, and they mentioned OS, but they mentioned them together as though they're the same thing.
I appreciate it.
They need a little clarity around Clarity as a tool versus what EOS is, and then how Clarity defines the actual best practices and value rocks that they talked about last week in the course. And there was no time for me because they literally did it at the end of one of the days. I wanted a moment to help clarify the difference and how it just never came about.
Yeah, that's really cool. We're going to, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Larry. I'm going to participate in, I believe it's in October, in their boot camp, the intro to the first phase of becoming a certified exit,
which is what I just did.
Yeah. And I would recommend anyone who's not an exit planner, call BEI. It is cost effective, it is time efficient, and it is killer learning. And I think some of that is when we started Growth Drive, right? I put the certification in Growth Drive, and we were using another piece of software. And so the emphasis of the messaging at the time was on, we then had the online launch course and the live certification, right? Well, as when my book dropped and the methodology and process that's in the book are now enshrined in software so that you guys can use it, apply it in your engagements. I think John's understanding of what we do, as you remember, he participated in our conference last year, as he may be based on, I think what you experienced reflects John's understanding, which at the time was correct. And now we know that we take, using BizEquity is great. And if you want to know, and that's great if we want an insurance value for the business, if we want to understand the transactional value, the transferable value of the business, you need clarity. So anyway, for those of you
in terms of value, they're really cash flow people. They see a place for enterprise value determined by the multiple of EBITDA, but they just believe that for exit, especially, not just growth, but real exit and preparing an owner, cash is king in the sense of determining value.
Yes, and having just been to their conference, I understand why. First of all, it's obviously relevant. It's not the dominant valuation method, and we have an investment banker here, so Steve, you can say, actually, George, you're wrong. But they are also, their audience is, they have an audience of wealth advisors and insurance advisors who are using BizEquity very happily. And God bless, we turbocharge BizEquity, right? I'm not saying don't use BizEquity. I'm saying if you want something that's going to make that value actionable, pick up the phone and call us, email us, we'll show you how it's done. It's interesting because when you think in terms of internal transfers, which is a lot of, management buyouts, gifting to the next generation, et cetera, the non-third-party sale exits, a lot of those, the value of the business is determined by cash flow because it's the cash flow that goes to determining the size of the note that can be carried by the outgoing owner. Does that make sense? So we actually had a presentation at their BEI's excellent conference in August. And those of you listening, check it out. Stay tuned. Make sure that you watch what they're doing because it's a really good conference. There's a presentation about this specific issue. And I can see why logically for internal transfers, the way the private capital markets view the business is kind of immaterial and may actually come up with a value that can't be supported by the cash flow of the business. So I'm getting a little arcane, but it's important because now our perspective is, hey, so you got your unicorn IPOs and they're out there, but there are this many. And then you have your third-party sales, and that's going to be the highest value, typically the highest value for the business. The highest of the high is going to potentially be a strategic or synergistic sale. And then the next tier is potentially private equity driven or reason the third party is going to buy the business. And when we get into third party transactions, the way we calculate value is absolutely relevant. Now we have a discounted cash flow calculator. I just haven't coded it. And I guess we could. And you come up with, it's going to just be like BizEquity, and you're going to come up with about the same number. But then you have to decide what's your slug for a discount rate, right? For companies.
If it's a stable company, the multiple on EBITDA and discounted DCF should be about the same.
That's correct. Yep.
Good. This is all not
which is why this type of growth, a DCF is especially for this kind of growth.
Yeah.
The DCF is not appropriate because you can't, the engine gives out and you do an inverted wing over at some point. Ask me how I know. I don't suppose by any chance any of you have been in a plane that did an inverted wing over.
Yeah. Don't care to.
And how to have your lunch in your nasal cavity. It's really fun in hindsight. And I'm boots on the ground. Anyway.
Yeah, a lot.
Does that go to but do you think, Larry, sorry to interrupt, but does my description and my answer comport with what you experienced?
Yes, I am not a financial expert. So I have enough understanding to understand, but I am not one who's going to pretend to be able to. That's why I bring in experts.
Jack Cox, where are you? Still not coming to our conference. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, you're
on a tear this morning, man. I apologize.
A lot of their work at BEI are internal transfers.
Yes.
Much more than PE or external third party. And because of that, there's cash flow is also really important for all the factors, whether it's to an employee, to family. And so that they emphasize that part of it, and that's the majority of their work. But it got me thinking in terms of who we are and how, and I've always talked about the entry point that your members come in from their perspective and background in this owner-based planning that it has a clumsy title to it, but is I think something that I know you're working with John and Klatsch now on how does everything we do really support that and line up as a dual entry point. And I just see that in your work with them needing a little smoothing out so they understand that based on the way they were talking.
Yeah, the meeting's already set. So, yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay, I'll leave it alone.
Oh, no, you don't have to leave it alone, man. This is good stuff. And it's a valuable debate or a valuable discussion for us to have out in the world, because when a client says, I have this, my financial advisor or whoever did this BizEquity valuation for my business, or when we have an unsolicited offer, a letter of intent, or we have a formal valuation that we got from a CVA or an ABV, right? Great professionals, but there's a bias in those, and the bias goes to the purpose for the valuation, and it's absolutely appropriate. It's not inappropriate. That just the bias goes to, if you're writing a valuation for insurance, you're writing an evaluation, you have competing valuations because there's, heaven forbid, a divorce, or you have a valuation for calculating buy sell, et cetera. Those are all those purposes get reflected in the value, and that goes into there are really two broad types of evaluations. There's an opinion of why.
Oh, you're really full of yourself.
There's an opinion of value. Gosh, the balloon's going up. There's an opinion of value, which is a formal. It's an important thing. It takes a lot of work. We have a lot of credentialed evaluators in the community, and there's a calculation of value. And a calculation of value, you and I can agree, is like, hey, Larry, I'm going to give you a calculation of value, and it's going to be based on the outputs of the clarity, strategic capacity, and business value analysis. Are you good with that? Yes, I'm good with that. Boom. Okay, we're inside, but the ASA, the CBA, and the ABV requirements, strictures for calculation of value versus an opinion. And you get an opinion from an ASA, a CVA, an ABV. Those are a different animal. And there are a lot of ASAs in the M&A space. Does that make sense?
No. You always most of the time you make sense. Sure.
Stay with me.
The other, to pile on a little bit on this, and when we go to clients, some like this plastics company in Missouri is really searching 10 years before they would ever think of exit. How do I grow? That fits the language I speak. But many business owners, when I think about it, when you talk about some of the things we do from a growth standpoint, we might be speaking a language of not how they wake up every day. But if we talk about, and I got this from last week, owner-based planning, if we talk about managing risk to lower your risk, and so you could continue to grow and achieve your goals, that idea of that business owners get the term risk all the time. So when I talk to a president and CEO of a company, They might not always speak the language of risk, but an owner of a company, regardless of any other title, they get the idea of managing risk. And so an entrance point into a prospect to get might be this owner-based planning in our own style, even if it's not BEI.
Amen, brother. Amen. Okay, you wound up the monkey. Thank you. So there are two things. One, I'll start with a provocative statement you've heard me make 1,000 times. The value is mildly interesting. It's mildly interesting. Okay, and I can explain that in a sec. The other is owner-based planning, which is I believe it's $495. If you're a business advisor, look at me. You need to go to BEI and take the course. It is terrific. It'll help you understand what Larry just said about ownership and risk, and give you entry points for conversation with wealth and insurance advisors. And a lot of wealth and insurance advisors are exit planners. They're using tools like BizEquity. And when their client says, well, that's not enough money, they say, well, I don't know what to tell you, right? That's where we come in. And Larry, let me pile on that point, if I might. So 2 nights of 8 hours of sleep, I haven't even had that much coffee. It's my natural effervescence. So let me pile on that, Larry, because that's what this week's blog post is about. And I am calling bullshit on myself. Actually, Mike Garrison called bullshit on me, and it made the light bulb go. That's the sound of a light bulb going on.
Oh, okay.
But I'm calling bullshit on us not being able to have this conversation with a business owner. Say, listen, take off your operator hat, put on your CEO hat. The fundamental role of the CEO is to maximize business value within the context of your vision and mission, right? That is your role as a CEO. And you need to understand, at least start thinking about the external risks to your business. Clarity will analyze operational risks and sticks its tentacles in every nook and cranny of the business. We also need to look at external threats like heart attacks, divorce, a senior leader leaving, and this all stuff. You and I have been. Steve, were you in the OBP training, owner-based planning?
No.
Okay, it's terrific, and I wish Mike Desiato was here. And he is, by the way, he's on fire. But we need to have a conversation, and during that conversation, say to the business owner, "Hey, I know this is all wealth and insurance, and I know you said you work with Rick over at UBS. I know Rick, he's a great guy. We played golf together last week. Has Rick ever talked to you about the external risks to your business as an asset, to its ability to grow, its cash flow, and if and when you leave the business, how that's going to happen?" And if he hasn't, I think you should talk to, let's pick someone, Brian, right? Because Brian can have that conversation. It's a free consultation. He's not interested in your 401k or your cash under management. Yes, he is. But maybe just talk to Brian. Would you take the meeting? Yes, I will. Great. Now we have done something incredibly smart, selfishly, is we are now making a referral to someone who has a Rolodex full of lots of business owning clients. And how do you get referrals? You give referrals. That's why one of the reasons I think owner-based planning is important. In our world, we call it business growth and continuity planning. And that's the module that's coming out here before the summit.
It's funny. They don't call it owner-based planning during the training. I had mentioned that to them, is that they call it business continuity planning.
Oh, good. I had sent a note over saying, I'm not taking credit. They're smart people. They know how to name stuff, right? I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. They mention owner-based, but they really, the chapter is business continuity planning.
Business continuity planning. That's exactly right. And it's fascinating because we can use advanced planning, sophisticated compensation, and insurance to take care of a whole lot of risks. And you've heard me say it, and I'll say it again, including creating an effective senior leadership team while also protecting cash flow and promoting good behavior, collaborative accountability to the vision and mission strategy and executing the strategy. Yeah, man. I love this stuff. Okay. I've done most of the talking today. It's supposed to be you guys. Okay, I'll shut up.
No, you won't.
Well, could. So yeah, there's so much good
So,
we're doing.
so I had a question for the
Joe, good morning.
group there. I drive around to going to my AM Spirit meeting, but it's a B&I type thing.
Well,
What are people using to keep updated with the client? Are they just doing SharePoint work, or what's the communication tool that you're using with clients and updating them on progress towards, getting a better score, strategic capacity score or whatnot? What seems to be kind of the fallback tool that you're using right now?
sure. I know what I would say. Larry, Steve, what are you guys doing? So you're executing. You've written the strategic plan. You're executing the plan. How are you keeping track? Because we're getting there. Okay, so we have our exit talkers, our exit educators, our growth talkers, our growth educators, and then we have an architect, and the architect's done his or her job and created a blueprint. And now you may be acting as the general contractor, turning the plan into reality. Are you tracking? And if you are, how progress on executing the plan?
I don't have a good case to cite. I'm got a bias. If I had a good fit, I'd be using the Metronomics software.
Okay, cool. And why the Metronomics software?
It's extremely comprehensive.
Okay.
And it does everything that the EOS system does times 10.
It's not hard to do what the EOS system does times 10, but they have their focus, and they're very, very focused. Okay, cool, Steve. Thanks. I'd love to pick your brain about that. How about you, Larry?
I've developed a format for a scorecard or a dashboard.
Yeah.
It's more of a scorecard. And what we do is they have to own it. They put it on a shared drive that I get to see as well. So listed are the goals, the KPIs, who's responsible, who backs up, what's the next step in progress to those KPIs and goals. Every one of my clients does a poor job when I use this of them staying on top of it.
Yes.
The concept of, these are all tools. So you asked a good question, Joe. These are all tools, and tools are they either make it more difficult to support the change or help in supporting the change. Tools for the sake of tools don't work. They have to have the right mindset and commitment together. So my work is more around, are they really ready to make change? And if so, how do we pulse that change? Because too much they won't do. No one. I have never had a client do more. They always will do less. So why plan for more? So I want them to feel the idea that they're succeeding. They get wins. And what we do is the quarterly rocks, but I don't call it rocks at all. But we do the quarterly focus on what's doable in that quarter. People, human behavior can make change up to 12 weeks. They could see up to 3 months. They can't see past that. Even if they endorsed and signed off on a plan for 1 year, 3 years, 3 months is the most they could. So we have monthly meetings on scorecard review. So you take Habitat for Humanity, one of the larger affiliates in the country that occupy most of the upper half, central through northern New Jersey. We have a scorecard for the board. We have the owner or the CEO scorecard, and we have for the management team. And we literally will go and do quarterly reviews, which will be September 18th in the morning is the next one. And we're going to review it step by step. It's tedious. And then it's accountability to that as well. And of course, it's accountability.
Hey, I've got a question that's kind of relative to that.
Yeah.
And, to the point that's being made here, all clients aren't created equal, but in terms of my quote unquote textbook, every business owner should be doing an annual strategic plan and then updating it quarterly and working it weekly and monthly and blah, blah, blah. What percentage of owners do you think or businesses do that?
None. Please read the preface to my book.
Well, I wouldn't say none. I mean, the Metronomics folks, that they do a 3-year plan by definition, and then review it, just as I said, weekly, monthly, quarterly, et cetera, et cetera.
Joe, thank you for pulling up the book. I would recommend that you read a lot of chapters, but chapters 8, 9, and 10 are on exactly this topic. And if I might, let me sketch out one man's perspective. We run an analysis of the business. We take that analysis. It gives us the data. Larry, you teach this in certification. You take that analysis. It gives us the data to fuel a strategy, right? A strategic plan. We have the strategic plan. We execute it by quarters. Now, we have an annual meeting. I'm going to simplify. An annual meeting there's a lot of work that comes into making sure that everybody has buy-in to the plan, right? It has contributed to the plan. We have an annual meeting to announce the plan and to talk about how we're going to do what we're going to do and to look at the first quarter. Cool. Now you can decide whether you need to do the annual meeting and a quarterly meeting or combine the two. Let's just combine the two. Let's keep it easy. The annual meeting is purely strategic. The quarterly follow-on meetings, so let's say quarters 2 and 3 and potentially 4 that prepare us for another annual meeting, are where strategy, they're strategic true-ups. How are we doing? We said we were going to accomplish these things, meet these KPIs, deliver these key results in this quarter. How did we do? Now, how did we do should not be a surprise, because in our monthly meetings and in our weekly meetings, Larry, to your point, we're using a scorecard. Ours happens to be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. Put it in Google Sheets, share it. Anyone with a link is a viewer. You can create an editor, doesn't matter. It's something super simple, super approachable, that is a do or die. It will be on my desk. I'm the CEO. It's on my desk by 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And if you're smart, it's on my desk by 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. But it's on my desk and it is emailed. We teach this in certification. It should be emailed to you, because this gives you a reason. Get your cup of coffee, get your phone, and call your client and say, hey, man, I just got the report. I know you have your Monday morning meeting. I see the cash flow is down, or I see that marketing's really crushing it, or, I see that, and we're tracking execution, right? So we're tracking our sprints. And in that sprint, boom. And in that sprint, we're saying, okay, are we red, amber, or green on people productive and loyal? We're amber. What's the problem? So as the CEO, all I have to do is look at the report, see amber, and say, okay, team, why are we amber? What's going on? That's it. It's the role as the CEO, is to ask what you've set direction and ask why. And so there's a sketch. If you want to learn about this, guys, C3D is the certification for you. Okay. Thanks, Larry. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I exactly that. It's a simple spreadsheet, and it's tied to the strategic plan, which is a 3-year plan. So the goals in 2024, this is from April. This is not, I don't have the latest on hard drive. So it's all on the shared drive. So you can see the goals and then how it lines up to components of the strategic plan, what department is responsible, who owns it. I think we've added who is the backup or who's responsible. Like Doug cannot do this alone. He needs the help of others. Who are those others? We put those in there by when, and then we start doing the progress check. And that's all updated on a shared drive. And so this is, now what we do is, here's the corporate on top. When we start getting below here, this is more detailed by department functionally.
Nice.
Now so what we had done is the advocacy group for Habitat, this is their 24 goals. The volunteer group, the homeowner services group, you get the
yeah.
So it's below color here is functional, above is, well, no, only up here is corporate wide.
Yeah.
This is what the board sees on a monthly basis.
By the way, for those of you listening, Larry is a killer advisor. His clients are lucky to have him. And this is a Habitat. His client is Habitat for Humanity, which is, you may have heard of. They are hell-bent on being successful, and they're a fantastic organization. Larry, can I pull on a thread here? You said over here in the owner column, Doug. You have Doug is the owner of Complete 21 Homes. Fantastic. If we think in terms of the 24 growth driving objectives. In the leadership module, we have suggested, right? Primary accountability. If more than one person is accountable, no one's accountable. Primary accountability for each of the 24 growth driving objectives across functional areas. It started by being by officer, and I said, wait a second, not by leader. We tie leaders in, but it's really, you have executive, finance, operations, and revenue, and those 4 areas comprise the totality of the business. That may not be how it plays out in your client, but it does give us guidance. So if Doug is primarily accountable, who needs to help Doug? Because Doug can't do this all by himself. Doug has a team. But Larry, can you comment on function mapping? Would it be appropriate to comment on function mapping here?
Yes. So here is my pharma client. I didn't create it. I walked in with them already being buttoned down. They're a $250 million company going to $1 billion. Big private equity bought it from smaller private equity in July. They're buttoned down. So what they've done is, and I've coached them on this a little. See, I put the word owner. They originally had who's responsible. But what we've done is with them, it's owner and co-responsible, and there's a % breakdown of responsibility as well. They're that button up, that they need that breakdown, because then performance management and their executives, this is only the senior leadership team, and that George has to help Doug, and George is 20% of his performance management and bonus is tied to helping Doug. And now George might be here and Doug is helping George in the same ratio.
Collaborative accountability, man.
Accountability. And so our cultural theme at the pharma company, because we always fit this to culture and we create cultural integration themes. So collaborative ownership is the next cultural maturity level evolution for them. Cultural ownership, the mindset around nothing great happens unless there's owners, and you're collaborating fully to completion of the task. So I'm lecturing a little bit. Sorry, Steve and Joe, but this is the only way I've ever found you get change.
Yes.
And so with that, even with the pharma client, it's heavy lifting sometimes when they don't stay on track.
Yeah, once you overcome inertia, when you go to push a car and at first it's really, really hard and you need 3 people. And then once it starts rolling, one person, if somebody can jump in the driver's seat, someone can hold the beers and the other person can push. And because you've overcome inertia. I think to Joe's point, Joe, you're now below me on the vertical here, Hollywood Squares. Joe, to your point, this could be embedded in a tool like 90.io. Happy to do it. But to Larry's and to Larry's point, and I know you know this, Joe, you're a veteran coach, a lot of experience. If you don't hold your client accountable, if you're not the co-driver, I say it, I think every week, go and watch. I'm going to post a rally video so that people can see and hear what a co-driver does. You're the co-driver. You need to be you need to be on them. You need to help them hold themselves accountable. That is part of our job as advisors.
I feel like being obnoxious, so I will.
Please, fire away.
What Larry just talked was a bunch of DEI nonsense. There should only be one person in charge, and there can be 50 people supporting, but there's one person that has the ribbon tied on them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you and Larry and Joe and I are in total agreement.
Well, I'm just debating here for the sake of debating. I personally don't like the 80-20. I'm 80% responsible and someone else is 20. Someone's responsible.
Yeah, I know. We're not going to see eye to eye on that, Steve.
Yeah.
Responsible is too low of a level of cultural understanding of what someone needs to do. It's ownership. They own that goal. And if you say that's semantics, I've learned it's not. Because responsible creates a mindset here. Ownership says, wow, I have a higher level management or senior leadership responsibility. But no one could ever accomplish it in a vacuum. And so there's only one owner. I only had one owner in each box in the column, one owner. But there are other people who need to weigh in for that to happen. And that's where the co-responsibility, not owner. So we're seeing eye to eye on this, one owner. That's all. I agree. If that
One person's accountable. Yeah.
Well, I'm good with that. When
right? Essentially an IDS meeting, have a meeting where you're having those open conversations about what's going on. A huddle meeting, you have a meeting where you're getting the team on the same, whatever those are, we call it flash reports. I mean,
Yeah,
does that,
I totally agree. I totally
Okay.
agree. And if a client is open to and committed to and intends to use a tool like 90 or Asana or Monday.com or Excel or whatever, the important thing is that they get this done. And what a tool like 90 brings from my perspective is a central point of truth. The Larry's point, I think, is a good one, and it's getting clients to start and stay with a tool. We need to get them to start and stay with the behaviors and record their progress, because data is part of accountability. Hey, you just said something, Joe, that what you just said, which is spot on. Why do we start in the beginning with a CEO saying, hey, I wonder what your senior leadership team sees the business's strategic capacity? Why would we run a senior leadership report, an alignment workshop? Why would we involve the senior leadership team in the deep analysis, in discussing the implications of that deep analysis, and in creating the plan? Why would we do that? So when at the beginning of the engagement, I'm saying, hey, man, you really want to run a senior leadership alignment report? It's Joe, it's to your exact point. If people aren't engaged in this whole process, then they're not invested in the whole process. They don't have buy-in. They haven't been heard, had a chance to share. And worst case scenario, we're building a plan based on, but bullshit. We're building it based on the most optimistic person at the table, who's the CEO. And the team's like, well, that's great. And I always use this example, sales is like, we're crushing it. And operations says, yeah, you're hitting your numbers, but you're selling red ones and all we make are blue ones. How do we make sure that all of those voices are heard from the very beginning? And it goes even earlier than that. And then I'll try to stop myself again. Even earlier than that, when we have the strategic intent, the growth conversation, so that we make sure that all of those subsequent conversations are rooted in the ultimate why for the shareholders. Where do the shareholders intend to take this business? What does it need to do? And need to do doesn't need to have dollar signs next to it, right? It needs to, I'm going to walk away and just interviewed Deb Everson. She's great. You'll see her podcast next week. They define success in exiting their business as making sure that their store remained a hardware store on Main Street in a small town in Minnesota. And so, the strategic intent doesn't have to have dollar, it may be, anyway, I'm on a tear. But Joe, your point's a really good one. And you teased out why that we need to involve along the way.
Yeah, just think about the overall cost to the organization. What's the number one cost beyond the cost of goods sold? And the things that we can help them is develop their leadership. And if we're setting a format in which they can have their meeting at the right level and connect everything down through to the line guy and have everything sort of, that's the goal of the software, is that make it very accessible. You're on vacation, or you're not vacation, but you're out of town traveling, you can loop in and wire into this program and discipline around it, to follow up notes that happen, the tracking there's a lot of clunky ways of doing it. I just say you, Mr. Owner, are required to be on this software, and they're over a period of, like, let's say 2 months, they realize the value of that software and how much it's helped them from a communications perspective. And then we inject the right terminology. But the whole thinking is, if that has to be one of the top 3 things going into these reports, is the senior leadership needs to get aligned. They got to get all this thinking. We got to give them a system and make it easier for us and more convenient for them to update us on what's going on. And that's my findings of working with something like 90 and implementing BOS, business operating system with them.
Awesome. Yeah, and yes, and when that happens, it's a beautiful thing.
I made this point.
Indelible mark.
Oh, Steve,
Guys, I'm going to have
yes, I do have a question, Joe, but
go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say I've made this point before, right, in these sessions, but there's no perfect meeting or perfect
Software.
well, there's no perfect software, but there's also no perfect company. Whether you got 90.io or Metronomics or a spreadsheet like Larry's got, the better companies measure stuff and review stuff. And that's really the key thing, measuring and reviewing on a regular basis and then adjusting as required.
That's why I totally agree. And in the software, in Clarity, we'll see, and there's no perfect software, and there is definitely no perfect company. In the software, we talk about, yes, and we have data to prove it. Yes, and we discuss the data. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve, man. That is the hallmark of a well-run, best-in-class business. Larry,
in fact, to your
and then let's wrap it up a couple minutes early because I have at 10:30.
Steve, to your point, not only very true, it's critical for the owners to understand, our client to understand that commitment to what you were just saying. So Joe, the way you were framing this is interesting because a lot of times we get buy-in like, oh yeah, I need more accountability in my team. I need more collaboration. I'm looking at my words here. Ownership, alignment. We need to communicate better. You don't get those things, the hallmarks of great companies like Steve just talked about, by just talking about them as a leadership team. Doing what you're talking about, establishing a structured system for how you get work done that lines up the goals and strategic plan. The byproduct is accountability, collaboration, ownership, alignment, communications. And that's I talk to them about that. We're not going to sit here and talk about accountability. We're going to live accountability. Here's a tool, whether it's 90IO or whatever, to help support that.
Yeah, and the power of the scorecard, right?
Yeah. And the byproduct of those meetings, conversations, the scorecard is all those other words. Joe, does 90IO have a calendar function?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really good project management software.
Yeah.
And Larry, let's talk offline, but I did want to put one last piece. It's selling and promoting Vistage to senior level leaders. Who are you going to invest in? Who are you going to invest in? You're going to invest in yourself and your leadership team. Number one, and if I can demonstrate that we have a tool that'll allow you to accelerate that learning, and oh, by the way, still keep an eye on the exit ball, that's where I think the owner gets so much more value, and it's an empirical value. It's a feeling like I can leave the office for a period of time because I know I have a way to check in on everything. And oh, by the way, they're enthusiastically posting those numbers. They're not regrettingly. If they're regrettingly, then let's have a conversation about it. But we're talking about the things that really matter, and developing their leader and investing in themselves every single day. You're going to find that entrepreneur placing that bet because that's what they did when they got in the company at the beginning. So if we can stay on the emotional side, it's not about the money. It's about investing in you as a leader and your team as a leadership team. So anyways.
Yeah, I know.
Get one.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Thanks for setting it up.
We'll make it happen.
Cool.
We'll have a version available.
Cool.
All right.
Bye, guys. All right. Wide-ranging. Don't roll the car, man. Wide-ranging conversation. If you want to do a quick round the horn, Larry, key takeaway from today?
That our community has matured where we can have intense conversations, not always agree, but and there's value in exchange of ideas and thoughts.
Absolutely. There is let me echo that, 100% value in exchanging. And there are a lot of good tools out there. My role is to make sure that we deliver client results and do it in a way that doesn't confuse anyone. Steve, key takeaway.
Analysis is great, but discipline makes it useful.
Discipline equals freedom, right?